India has one of the largest orphan populations in the world, with the nation home to more than 30 million children who are orphaned or abandoned. And those numbers grew further during the COVID-19 pandemic as the country was ravaged by the virus. Adoption rates are low in India amid strict laws, which means that many parentless children rely on orphanages to provide the stability and care that they need. And those running the orphanages face the enormous task of trying to ensure that these kids have decent childhoods and are equipped to contribute to society once they become adults. These two sisters, aged 13 and 14, have been under the care of this orphanage for 3 years. Their parents were both alcoholics, and the family was homeless. Their mother fell ill and passed away. Their father died from tuberculosis shortly after. The orphanage asked us to disguise the girls' identities to protect the children under rules set by local authorities.
कोई को पेरेंट्स मिलना आते तो उनको देख के हम लोग का मन करता है कि हमारे फैमिली क्यों नहीं है, मेरे मॉम डैड क्यों नहीं है, उन कहाँ गए, हम लोग को मिलने क्यों नहीं आते। लेकिन बाद में सोचते हैं कि पता चलता है कि उन दुनिया में है ही नहीं।
The girls are still struggling to come to terms with the loss of their parents. But at this orphanage, where they are cared for by a group of nuns, they have a newfound stability compared to living on the streets, where life was precarious.
हम लोग को टाइम पे पढ़ाई मिलता है, खाना मिलता है, जो हम लोग को चाहिए वो सब मिलता है। सुबह उठने का, ब्रश करने का, फिर प्रार्थना करने का, फिर प्रार्थना नाश्ता करने का, फिर नाश्ते के बाद स्कूल जाने का, फिर स्कूल से वापस आने के बाद खाना खाने का, फिर तो काम करने का जो सिस्टर ने दिया है, फिर अपना जो पर्सनल वर्क है वो करने का, फिर वापस ट्यूशन रहता है, ट्यूशन के लिए जाने का, फिर ट्यूशन से वापस ऊपर आने का, फिर प्रार्थना करने का, फिर सिस्टर अटेंडेंस लेती है, उसके बाद खाना खाने का, फिर थोड़ा काम करने का, फिर सो जाने का।
The sisters are just two of the 30 million estimated orphaned and abandoned children in India, many of whom are from impoverished backgrounds. The problem of already large numbers of orphans was only exacerbated by COVID-19, after more than 500,000 people lost their lives to the pandemic in India, according to official data, leaving more children without parents. The actual number of COVID deaths in India is widely believed to be far higher. An article in medical journal The Lancet estimates that 1.9 million children were orphaned in India in under 2 years due to the virus. The Indian government has dismissed this as having no correlation with ground reality. Diseases including HIV and tuberculosis are other factors behind parent loss. Many kids do end up being taken in by relatives, but others wanting to offer a permanent home to an orphan in India face a complex legal process in the country, which means rates of adoption are abysmal. Foster care isn't widespread in the country either. As a result, many parentless children end up in orphanages, which, while activists say play an important role, don't always provide the close-knit family environment kids need.
We are not favor of institutionalization of these children to end up at orphanage. We would like to, we are always strive and we are always advocate for children. They get homes, they get parents, they get personal cares.
This is Sneha Sadan house number 7. So the children here all go to the neighboring schools, and this is a boys' home, of course.
CNA Correspondent, an NGO in Mumbai, has been around for 60 years after it was founded by a Jesuit priest. It's trying to ensure that the orphans and street kids it takes into its 12 orphanages are welcomed into home-like environments. The organisation houses more than 200 kids from the age of 6 up to 18. At one of its homes, 16 boys are being taken care of by house parent Bharat Patel and his own family. Bharat was himself an orphan who came to CNA Correspondent at the age of 4. When he left as an adult, he worked as an interior decorator, married and had 2 kids. Then in 2014, things came full circle when he decided to rejoin CNA Correspondent to look after orphaned children.
मुझे बच्चों को संभालने के लिए बहुत अच्छा लगता है। बच्चे लोगों को आगे ITI कराना है, मुझे उनको एजुकेशन कराना है और मुझे स्नेहा सन बच्चों को बहुत खुशी हो कि मैं संभालने के लिए आया हूँ और बच्चों को भी बहुत खुशी है कि स्नेहा सन के बच्चे और अच्छे कर पा रहे हैं।
Among the boys he's looking after are these 2 brothers, aged 17 and 8. Their father passed away 6 years ago after being paralysed, although the boys say they are unsure exactly what caused his death. They started living on the streets. before their mother died of a heart attack a few years later. A year ago, the authorities found the brothers and their 6-year-old sister and brought them to Snea Sudan. Their sister was adopted last year and they now only see her occasionally. But the brothers say they are glad that she has that opportunity and that their own situation is much better now, having had to fend for themselves. The eldest worked in a restaurant to take care of his siblings.
मैं वहाँ से 10 गुना ज़्यादा यहाँ पे खुश हूँ क्योंकि यहाँ पे पढ़ाई मिलता है, खाना मिलता है, टाइम पे नहाना धोना मिलता है, टाइम पे कपड़ा मिलता है, हर एक चीज़ की यहाँ पे व्यवस्था है और वहाँ पे बस काम करना रहता था और भाई बहन को संभालना, नहाना का ठिकाना भी नहीं रहता था.
For children who arrive at orphanages, there is often a long process of rehabilitation to go through, including counselling.
Many of the children do need a lot of attention in those terms because lots of baggage they carry and come with all their background, this thing like that, lots of things. So those have to be slowly sorted out, piece by piece. So to try to get them out of many of the traumatic situations which they have faced earlier.
Like orphanages across the country, Snea Sudan was affected during the pandemic as lockdown restrictions made it more difficult for supplies to come in. And now, with inflation soaring, running costs are rising. But they say they are managing to make ends meet with donations from corporates and individuals. The kids who are homed at good orphanages are better off than many parentless children in India. In cities including Mumbai, kids are all too often seen roaming the streets, begging, doing menial work, or some are trafficked and forced into child labour or even abused. Activists say that India's government is working hard to try to address the issues, including providing funds for institutional care. But there are still kids who are falling through gaps in the system and end up fending for themselves, meaning there is much more work to be done to try and ensure all kids who lose their parents find a safe haven. India may have some of the largest numbers of orphans in the world, estimated at tens of millions, but the country's adoption rates are extremely low and they're declining. Orphanages say that the adoption process is mired in red tape and strict laws in India, which means that most orphan kids aren't even officially put up for adoption. They're calling for changes to the system and a crackdown on illegal adoption to help address the problem. When Prasad and Ananya Patwardhan found out that they were unable to conceive a child of their own, they turned to adoption. It wasn't easy though. They applied in 2017 and were put on a long waiting list. After 2 years, their patience was rewarded and they were finally told that there was a baby boy they could adopt. The couple jumped at the opportunity. Sriram is now 4 years old and the couple say they couldn't be happier.
First child, I selected. I don't go for further, and he is very good, and it's God gift for us.
The Patwardhan family were very fortunate. There are more than 25,000 people registered to adopt children in India, but only a few thousand kids are officially available for adoption. That's despite the country having an estimated 30 million orphaned and abandoned children. Those who run orphanages say the gap in the numbers is partly because many of these kids, who are often from poor backgrounds, end up on the streets, while others may be taken in by relatives.
Number of children who are produced in the community in orphan on paper is quite high. Very few reach the orphanages. Many people are coming forward to adopt these children, orphan children, and this thing. So their number is constantly increasing.
Vatsalya Trust is an orphanage and one of just around a dozen licensed adoption centres in Mumbai. Since it was set up almost 40 years ago, more than 1,200 adoptions have taken place through the NGO. In the year to March 2022, official figures show that around 3,400 children were adopted in India, but that's about half the number of adoptions that took place in the country a decade earlier. One reason adoption rates are low is that parentless children in some cases don't have the required documents to allow them to be put up for adoption. For example, because homeless families may not even register a death. It's a problem other orphanages are seeing.
These children, the so-called orphan ones also, they would be free for adoption or they can be declared free for adoption only if certain criteria or certain amount of documents are available.
Orphanages say another reason behind the gap is that many people are going through unofficial or illegal adoption routes, done completely outside the system. Anyone who wants to adopt in India is meant to go through a national centralised government agency. It's called the Central Adoption Resource Authority, or CARA.
There has a huge gap between what number of children getting in adoption and the people having preferences. They're coming forward towards adoption. But however, there are a lot of illegal adoptions happen, and that number has been really great.
Once all the checks have been completed and adoptive parents are matched with a child through CARA, adoption centres like Vatsalya then handle the final stages of the process. Before 2015, however, adoption agencies like this one would manage almost everything. Prospective parents would go directly to centres like Vatsalya and its staff would match them with kids under their care. But 7 years ago, the Indian government rolled out new adoption regulations which centralised the system. This means everyone goes through one single database online, and adoptive parents can potentially be matched with a child anywhere in the country by an algorithm. It's a much more impersonal process compared with what Vai Baravaze and his wife experienced when they adopted a baby girl 8 years ago.
It is a slightly mechanical process because the human element has minimized now. And I think during adoption process, the human element should be there at every step.
While experts agree that CARA's centralised system has created more transparency and is aimed at streamlining and enforcing regulations to protect children more strictly, the number of adoptions has declined sharply since its introduction. To ease the adoption process, Vatsalya's trustees say that adoption should be allowed to take place through more orphanages and through hospitals to expand the country's adoption programme. They also say they want to see authorities do more to stamp out illegal adoption. Experts point out that the number of prospective parents in the official adoption system may outpace the number of kids, but they say that the number of people who want to adopt in India is still very low, considering its population of almost 1.4 billion. Culturally, adoption isn't widely accepted as a practice in India.
They believe in their own blood, own genes should be in their child. So adoption not only adoption cases are not promoting adoption because of policies tight, but the psyche of human in Indian, especially Indians, they also believe in age of child should be less, color of child should be fair.
Adoptive parents say friends and family do sometimes question their decision to adopt.
Because we have caste system in India, so I think people may ask you that which caste that child belongs to or which religion that child belongs to. You never know that how you have adopted. People ask us also.
But there are many kids that get left behind. Like in other parts of the world, adoptive parents typically seek babies, which means that older children often remain in orphanages throughout their childhood. To address this, experts say that India needs to develop a foster care system and culture.
Higher age children needs to be going through this process of foster parenting if there are not many adoptive parents, so that they equally enjoy the family atmosphere, care and protection.
This would ensure that more orphans in need of homes in India have a chance to be part of a loving family.
There are around 600 orphanages nationwide here in Japan, and 30,000 children are said to be residing in those orphanages. But most are not actually orphans. They're admitted due to abuse at home. And according to police, there are a record number of cases of abuse reported. Now, to understand what is happening, I decided to talk to an orphanage here in Kita-Kyushu. 33 children currently reside here in Akatsuki no Kane Gakuen. The youngest accepted is 2. When they reach 19, they must leave. Kyoshi Shimada, a former high school principal, manages the orphanage and guided me.
夏休み中の午後ですから勉強する姿はほとんどなくてテレビ見てゲームをして過ごしてますね。はい。
The little ones seek the attention of staff, and there's a reason.
本気に子どもと向き合えてないというような親は確かに増えたんじゃないかなというふうには思ってます。養育ネグレクトですね、それから虐待といったものがやっぱり急速に増えている。これはもううちの施設だけではなくてですね、どこの施設も同じような傾向にあるんじゃないかと思ってます。
They have faced challenges. There's been children inflicting injury on themselves, such as cutting their wrist. This young woman had scars on her wrist. I couldn't ask the 15-year-old why she's done this to herself, as I did not have the consent from her guardian for a TV interview. I had a consent of a parent of another teenager for a sit-down interview. Well, one young lady, she's 14 years old, has agreed to speak to me. She's been here at the orphanage for 4 years, and this is her room. She shares it with another. It's furnished with products donated by IKEA. I decided to call her Madoka, not her real name, to protect her identity.
私はなんか小学生の時もなんか児童養護施設に行ったんですよ。お母さんがなんか精神的になんかやばいなって感じてたから児童養護施設に預けたみたいで。
Her mother was divorced and raised Madoka alone, but she did not have a job, supported by national subsidy. 病名は何かわかります？
病名、糖尿病1型かなですね。
Madoka does not remember being abused at home, but she had her own problems.
ゲームの依存してて、それになんか学校がめんどくさいなって思ってたんですよ。だからそこで不登校 しながらゲームしてました。
As her mother was in and out of the hospital, Madoka at one point was placed under the care of foster parents. She could not acclimatize, so she left. Her mother was not well enough to take her back, and she rejoined an orphanage. 自分たちの家庭環境についてみんなと話したりすることってあります？
当たり障りないように自分から聞くんですよ。なんかどういう環境だった？なんかそんな言いたくないなら言わなくてもいいけどみたいな、なんか頑張って気づかないように。大抵の人はなんかすぐ教えてくれるんですよ。なんか自分が虐待に遭っててもなんか私は虐待を受けてるんだとか言ってくれます。
結構多いですか、そういう？
多分3家族ぐらいはある。でもみんななんか明るく過ごしてます。
Reports of physical and mental abuse of children has been on the rise nationwide since statistics were taken in 1990, according to the Ministry of Health. Kitakyushu, a city with a population of 925,000, has followed the trend. I visited Hiroshi Takahashi, in charge of child raising support, on cases in the city.
今対応件数はだいたい2300件ぐらい、10年前がだいたい300件ぐらいだったと思いますけれども、増えてます。令和2年度と3年度を比較すると、そこまでは増えてない、ほぼ横ばいのような状態。
Authorities feel the reason why more abuse at home is coming to light is because local assembly members formed an ordinance against child violence and launched public campaigns. This, they feel, has prompted citizens to speak up when they notice suspicious cases. Hajime Nishida, a Kitakyushu Assembly member, is spearheading support for children from broken homes. He has taken over from his father to run Akatsuki no Kane Gakuen Orphanage.
子どもが毎日泣き叫ぶ声が聞こえる、そういった情報をですね、どんどん行政に寄せてください、あるいは警察に寄せてください。そういった啓発がですね、虐待の通報件数をどんどん増やしている。私はその虐待の通報件数が増えているということに関しては、単純に悪いこととは思っていません。
A parent who has a child in this orphanage agreed to share with me their thoughts on placing her child here. I decided to call her Sanae. Her husband, who I've named Taku, came along. He is not the father of the child.
嫁が虐待したって言ってから児童相談所に通報して、それでもう児童相談所が引き取ったような形になって。
But Sanae denied that accusation.
まあ知的障害っていうか発達障害、ADHD。
引き取るのは難しいですかね。
無理でしょうね。
そうですね。
だけどある程度本人がこう、知恵じゃないけど学習して普通の生活少しでもできるようになれば引き取れるかもしれんけど。
They did not consider giving him up for adoption.
養子縁組に出してまた同じことになるのもあんこがかわいそうなんで、もう養子縁組には出さない。
In Japan, parents who are unable to raise their children for whatever reason are unwilling to give them up for adoption. In Kitakyushu, there is less than 5 cases of adoption a year, while 400 children live in 6 orphanages. And when they reach 19, they must leave. But many cannot financially support themselves. Hajime Nishida plans to extend help for such children through a new project. The orphanage will relocate to this area, which is more residential and where there are factories. Now, it's in July 2023 that it will reopen here. The local community will be welcome to mingle with the children. Children will live in more compact spaces, similar to a typical home. The facility is trying to promote living together in a small group, and that experiment is happening here. Each child will take turns to cook, clean, and do the laundry to learn to follow social rules, and also when they leave the orphanage one day, they will have the skills to survive on their own.